Good afternoon, everybody. This morning, Secretary Napolitano announced new actions my administration will take to mend our nation's immigration policy, to make it more fair, more efficient, and more just, specifically for certain young people, sometimes called dreamers.
That was 8 years ago, June of 2012. President Obama, in the Rose Garden, announcing a program that would affect hundreds of thousands of undocumented young people who came to the U.S. as children.
Now, these are young people who study in our schools, they play in our neighborhoods, they're friends with our kids, they pledge allegiance to our flag. They are Americans in their heart, in their minds, in every single way but one, on paper.
Now they could stay without fear of being deported. These young people could apply for protection under a program known as Daca, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, a temporary step until Congress passed more permanent immigration reform.
Now, let's be clear. This is not amnesty. This is not immunity. This is not a path to citizenship. It's not a permanent fix. This is a temporary stopgap measure that lets us focus our resources wisely while giving a degree of relief and hope to talented, driven, patriotic young people.
But 3 years ago?
I'm here today to announce that the program known as Daca that was effectuated under the Obama administration is being rescinded.
The Trump administration canceled Daca.
If we are to further our goal of strengthening the constitutional order and the rule of law in America, the Department of Justice cannot defend this overreach.
We are here to stay.
There were massive protests. And a lawsuit that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. A decision is expected any day now. And if the court rules in favor of the Trump administration, more than 700,000 dreamers, now in limbo, could be subject to deportation. I'm Tremaine Lee, and this is Into America. Today, we're going into the fight over Daca with a lawyer for whom this fight is personal.
This is going to be a situation where Donald Trump is trying to deport my clients and me with them.
Luis Cortez Romero, just 32 years old, is one of the lawyers for the Daca recipients. And if the decision goes against his clients, it will also go against him. He is one of the dreamers. He joined us from Washington State. So I know you didn't just sprout from the steps of the Supreme Court, right? Tell us about where you're from and your family and everything.
I was born in Mexico, and I was brought to the United States when I was 2 years old. And so I grew up in California and still consider myself a California guy and really identify with that. But as I was getting older, I knew that I was an immigrant and I knew that I wasn't born here. But my life really has been a series of events of figuring out what that means. When I was in 8th grade, my 8th grade class was organizing a trip to Europe. And throughout the school year, we were supposed to be selling chocolate in order to fundraise some of the money. And I tried to hustle that chocolate to whoever would buy it.
Just throwing chocolate at everybody. You're getting some, you're getting some.
Yeah. And so, I was getting very excited because I was reaching the goal and I was on pace to make it. And so I had explained to my mom, I'm really excited to go. And that's when she, I think, finally just dropped it on me saying, you can't go because you weren't born here.
Hearing that from your mother, how did that feel? And also, was it like a family secret? Like, were they keeping this from you?
I just really didn't know what that meant.
Right.
But what I did know is that we did try to keep the fact that we weren't born here from other people. And I became aware of that when we started seeing ICE raids in our community. All of a sudden, what seems like patrol cars kind of surrounding buildings, they're taking people. And all I knew at the time is it's because we weren't born here. And so there were moments where we wouldn't even go to school because we couldn't leave our apartment because there's ICE outside. My dad was deported when I was in high school.
Wow. So it went from kind of being an inconvenience to something that could be dangerous.
Yeah.
Does it rear its head again? I'd imagine applying for student loans in college. Did it trip you up?
In my first year of law school, I realized that I very likely couldn't be admitted to the bar because I wasn't born here. It was snowing and I was in my car and I called my mom, and it was right before Thanksgiving break. And I told her, I think I'm going to drive back home and I just don't think I'm going to come back. So I'm going to pack up my stuff. I'm letting you know now, I'm packing up all my stuff. I don't want to go through all of this and, try to hustle for tuition money and all of that when I'm not going to be able to practice law. So I'll figure something else out. And she said, you are not leaving. She said, they can't unteach you what they're going to teach you there. So you go and you learn all of that and we'll figure the rest of it later. People like you aren't in those spaces. So you don't come back over here or you're going to have to deal with me.
Wow. So you're pushing through. And then in 2012, President Obama announces DACA, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. What did that mean for you? Like, what were you feeling? Was this a glimmer of hope?
It was the summer before my last year of law school. So people are already talking about what they're going to do after they graduate. I still had no idea. And so this then comes down the summer before I'm supposed to graduate, the summer before my last year. And I could not believe it. I could not believe it. And it was the first time that I felt safe, at least temporarily. I became much more open about my status, much more vocal, because now I knew that it at least felt that there wasn't going to be that direct repercussion that someone could just call ICE because they disagreed with me. It took this weight off of me that I didn't realize how heavy it was until it was off of me.
We fast forward to September of 2017. President Donald Trump is in office, and he's pledging to repeal DACA. What went through your mind when you heard Donald Trump talking about taking this status away?
I, at that point, had graduated law school. I was already working as a lawyer in Seattle, Washington. I'm working a lot at the immigrant detention centers. I was already kind of in federal courts trying to defend DACA, at least at some level. And so when DACA was rescinded, I saw the announcement and I thought about my clients. So what do we do? I saw that the state of California filed a lawsuit. The UC Regents of California filed a lawsuit. Then, but I was where are the stories of the DACA recipients themselves, the ones who very lives are at stake? Someone needs to hear our stories. So we got a cross-section of 6 DACA recipients. And it's not just a Latino issue, and so we made sure that was represented within our lawsuit. And it's a cross-section of students, community organizers, special ed teachers, a doctor, a lawyer. And we collectively then decided to tell the story and filed lawsuit within a few days of the DACA program being rescinded. And we filed it, I think, the program was rescinded on a Monday. We filed a lawsuit on a Thursday, and we were now in court by, the next Monday. We had to fly down to San Francisco and we got things rolling.
Has the fact that you're actually a DACA recipient ever come up in court while you're standing in front of a judge in a case? Has it come up?
Yeah. When we were in district court in San Francisco, I tell him about what the application process looks like, because Judge Alsop is very interested to know about the practicalities. And at one point he asked, well, how do you know all this? You're giving me a lot of detail. It's when I tell him I'm a DACA recipient, and I know this because I just had to get my fingerprints redone and my photo retaken not that long ago. And I know this process because I lived this process. And there was a silence in the court, but a very loud silence. All of a sudden, the issue was right in front of everybody. It wasn't an abstract issue. It wasn't about hundreds of thousands of people outside. For a moment, it was about the one person inside.
So the case ends up making its way all the way up to the Supreme Court with you as co-counsel on the case. How did we actually get there?
The executive branch, the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice, do have wide discretion on immigration matters, but the how they go about having these decisions done and the decision-making process is what really keeps the executive branch accountable. President Trump said, I have to end the program because it's unlawful. I have no choice on the matter. And so he was kind of hiding behind that. And so we had to prove DACA's legality in order to say, well, no, you did have a choice in the matter. And, you saying that you don't is not a lawful reason for you to end the program. The Judge Alsop agrees. and, puts an injunction. The Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals agrees with us again. And so we win there, and the Department of Justice takes it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court sits on the case for a while, doesn't know whether it's going to want to hear it. In the meantime, there are other lawsuits that are being filed in Washington, D.C., in New York, and in different areas. And by the time the Supreme Court takes our case up, it takes all of these other case ups that had been filed since then, and it all gets consolidated together at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Up next, making the case. Luis walks us through the legal arguments on Daca and the possible outcomes that could impact him and his clients. That's after the break. We're back with Luis Cortez Romero. And here's how his colleague Ted Olson, the lead attorney defending Daca, opened his arguments at the Supreme Court.
The government's termination of Daca triggered abrupt, tangible, adverse consequences and substantial disruptions in the lives of 700,000 individuals, their families, employers, communities, and armed forces. That decision required the government to provide an accurate, reasoned, rational, and legally sound explanation. It utterly failed to do so.
So let me ask you this, Luis. Last November, right? You're 31 years old. A kid who almost dropped out of law school, but your mother had to pop you in the head and make you stay the course. You're young, you're there. What is that like in that moment for you? Like being there, so young, your journey, and there you are.
Yeah, I had never been to the Supreme Court before, and so
you hadn't even been there before.
No, I hadn't even been there.
Right.
I went the day before, and just to check it out. When I was there, I realized that these are the steps where a lot of really important decisions are made. So much happens here, and I thought a lot about what it must have felt like for some of the big civil rights cases before and after. The day of, I arrived at the Supreme Court with Ted, and there's already thousands of people there.
I am somebody, and I deserve full equality right here, right now. My mother is somebody.
I start to also really see that there's so much writing on this. We knew it, and we always know it, but it feels a bit abstract when you're dealing with it all the time. We start seeing a lot of these faces there, and when we go into the Supreme Court, I start feeling it's a majestic place, but I can't help but feel that it's a place that very few make it in, and that people like me don't make it in there. Then the ball starts rolling.
I know you didn't make the arguments yourself. Ted Olson did. But in a nutshell, what was the case for retaining Daca? What was it? What were you guys arguing?
So, it really just falls into three buckets, ultimately, what the consequences can come out. But the first one is we're trying to show that Daca was lawful, that Daca was a legal program. Because one of the reasons that President Trump had rescinded the program was because it was unlawful. So if we can show that it was lawful, then the reasons he did it was essentially void. Way after the program had ended, or he tried to end the program, he then said, well, even if the program is lawful, I don't think it's a good policy, so I'm just going to rescind it myself. In order to do that, you need to show that you considered all the things that are at stake. And once you considered all the things that are at stake, and if you still decide to rescind the program, then you can. Our argument was you rescinded the program without considering all the stuff at stake. And we had a lot of what are called Amicus Briefs, which are friend of the court briefs. Fortune 500 companies submitted a brief saying this is going to create a multi-billion-dollar deficit if all of a sudden hundreds of thousands of people are now stripped from the work authorization and worse, told that they have to leave the country. We want the justices to know that this isn't about the 800,000 applicants. It's about them and their communities. We're talking about teachers and their students, lawyers and their clients, doctors and their patients. It's going to be millions of people who this is going to impact if this program is allowed to be rescinded, and President Trump did not seem to take any of that consideration. So our circuit argument is, even if we can prove the legality of the program, he didn't consider all of the things, all of the consequences before rescinding the program. And the third part of it is any kind of after the fact considerations are just that, kind of after the fact, and the law requires for you to do it beforehand. The Department of Justice argues, well, we might have not done our homework all the way correctly, but it's good enough. And so we're saying that good enough doesn't cut it. And so that's kind of what's at question here.
And so what are like the possible outcomes that you might expect? And what would be one where it's like the dream scenario for DACA recipients?
Yeah, so the dream scenario for DACA recipients would be that the court says, one, yes, the DACA program is lawful. And so that is announced. And then two, that the way in which President Trump rescinded the program was unlawful. He didn't take all these things into consideration, it shows. And so if you're going to rescind the program, you then need to explain how you took all of these economic, personal considerations at stake, particularly in light of a pandemic. That would be the dream scenario, because then President Trump would be forced to take ownership of ending the program in an election year where an overwhelming amount of Americans support DACA. So I think he has a tough political choice to make there. That would be the dream scenario. The kind of middle road scenario is where the Supreme Court says DACA is lawful, but the way in which President Trump rescinded the program, and maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. So we're going to allow him to terminate the program. Now, the reason that's a bit of middle of the road is because at least the court had said DACA is lawful. So if there's a change in presidential administration in the future, there could be a DACA 2.0 potentially. That would be a bit of a soft landing for DACA. The worst case scenario is for the Supreme Court to say DACA is unlawful outright. It shouldn't have been a program that started anyway. And so DACA is unlawful. So it doesn't matter if he didn't do all his homework because it was unlawful. Now that would prohibit any future administration from doing some sort of other type of DACA program. And so that I think would be the worst case scenario for the outcome of the case.
What's at stake for DACA recipients here? How will this impact the real lives of everyday people such as yourself who've been here since children, who are fighting for a piece of what America says it is?
Yeah. When DACA was started, one of the promises made by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice is that turn over all your information and we will not share it with ICE. We will only use it to process your application. The Department of Homeland Security has taken that back multiple times, and it will, according to the Department of Homeland Security, it will be the start of a removal process where we will be sent to immigration court for those who have that privilege. Be sent to immigration court, and then the immigration system is set up in a way where it's virtually impossible to win for a DACA recipient in the circumstances. That's why DACA was created, because there is no other way. And ultimately, an immigration judge very likely will have his hands tied and say, there's nothing under the law that I can do to protect you. Here's your deportation order.
When I hear that, it always sounds crazy because there are stories of people who haven't been in Mexico or wherever since they were like 3 years old. And here they are in this foreign land. Some of them don't speak the language. Yeah. That sounds terrifying.
It sounds very terrifying to lose the community that we've built here with each other and with our peers, our contributions. And there was a case that I remember from back from like the 1950s, where the Supreme Court said that deportation leads to the loss of what makes life worth living. And I think that could be true in a lot of ways. And so, we are going to see hundreds of thousands of young people start a process of an exile and to start anew where we might not have community. We may not have support or might not even speak the language.
Is there any sense of how quickly one might expect proceedings or deportations?
One of the things that this administration has been great about is really stripping the procedural safeguards in immigration proceedings. They've proposed rules that would streamline the process where an outcome can be done, within a matter of months. Usually the immigration courts are a bit backlogged, so it would take maybe a year, 2 years in order to kind of get it over with. With these new proposals, if we're looking at a worst case scenario, we need to know what that timeline looks like in order to push Congress and push in this election to do the just thing, to do the right thing.
So how are you feeling in this moment, man? You're a lawyer, but you'll be impacted however the court decides as a DACA recipient. So as you sit here today having this conversation, how does it feel?
It's nerve-wracking, and I'll be honest. There are moments where sometimes that weight feels a bit heavier than other days, knowing that my fate is wrapped up with all of my clients, and it's a lot. Particularly in this climate where there's already a lot happening. Sometimes it gets a bit overwhelming, but I'm also inspired, at least at this moment. I'm reminded of what brought about some of the most serious change in America. And we see this, I think, across movements where it's the direct action by people, not Congress, by people, that really changes America for the better. I've always seen that it's activism that leads and the law that follows it. And we're seeing that in huge strides now. So I do feel inspired. I do feel inspired that even if the decision goes the other way, that we're in a moment where we're shifting America to the promise that it's supposed to be, and that we're becoming more perfect and a better version of what we all know it is. And so, I have a lot of faith in people.
Luis, thank you so very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure we will be hearing from you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such an honor to be here.
That was Luis Cortez Romero, one of the lawyers on the Daca case currently being decided by the Supreme Court, and a Daca recipient himself. The court is expected to issue a ruling on Daca before the end of this month. Into America is produced by Isabel Angel, Allison Bailey, Aaron Dalton, Max Jacobs, Barbara Rabb, Claire Ty, Aisha Turner, and Preeti Varathan. Original music by Hannes Brown. Our executive producer is Ellen Frankman. Steve Lichtai is executive producer of audio. I'm Tremaine Lee. And just as a reminder, we're out 3 days a week now. So we'll see you tomorrow. Then again next Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Y'all take care.